So I'm going to introduce Achenu, which is our prayer in which we find our unity with the Jewish people across the world. It's been a year, so before I do this, I want to let you know that I'll be sharing some unsettling reflections about October 7th. Now, I won't be graphic at all, but nonetheless, if you're not in the right headspace or emotional frame of mind to hear about this on this day, I invite you to take a little break and go stretch your legs and take some air and return in about 15 minutes. I won't talk for that long, but we're also going to sing. But I'm also a rabbi who doesn't lie, but sometimes, those kinds of things with time, On October 28th, 2023, I found myself on a plane to Israel, and it was hard for me to articulate why I felt so strongly that I needed to go, but I could not in my heart or in my body be anywhere else. I felt compelled to get close with the other half of the Jewish people who might be so far away from us, but reside so close as well in our hearts. I had to go because I believe in Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. I believe we share a soul and a fate and a destiny. Am Yisrael Chai. And like it or not, as my teacher and colleague, Rabbi Daniel Hartman of the Shalom Hartman Institute says, we are burdened by each other. If a Jew suffers in one part of the world, then a Jew in another part of the world screams out in pain. And there are so many painful aspects to this war, the unthinkable and brutal attack on October 7th that took more than 200 hostages, and some of whom have been murdered in Gaza, while others remain in captivity and their families living in this agonizing liminal space, not knowing whether they are alive or dead, or if they will ever be reunited. And the duration and escalation of this horrible war is shocking and tragic. It's tragic that it's gone on so long, and shocking that it's put so many in harm's way. And then there's the anti-Semitism that's unearthed around the world and right here in the US. And the way in which Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran use the Palestinian people as pawns and human shields while calling out Israel for perpetuating a genocide. Now, one of my mentors, Rabbi Yechiel Pupko, rabbinic scholar at JUF Chicago, explained it like this. He says that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a conflict between two people seeking to realize their national aspirations, and I would add dignity, at the same time and in the same place. And this is a conflict that lends itself to compromise. Both sides will have to accept painful compromises. But then he adds, the conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah is not a this worldly conflict. Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are ideological enemies of the Jewish people. And that's not possible to reconcile, not with ideological enemies. So this is why when visiting kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope and talking with kibbutzniks, the majority say that they will go back, and some already have, because they've known their Palestinian neighbors before Hamas took hold. And they believe that those Palestinian neighbors will prevail in the future after this awful terror regime has been eradicated. It is burdensome and dangerous to be members of the people of Israel. And it's uncomfortable and infuriating as this war has wreaked so much suffering on Israelis and Palestinians and now Lebanese and Syrians, most of whom never asked Hamas and Hezbollah to start this horrible war. I continue to resonate with Israeli author Etgar Garrett, who wrote shortly after October 7th, "This is a perplexing state of affairs because I was taught that for every losing side, there was a winning side. So when exactly did the world turn into a game in which everyone loses? These days, being part of the Jewish people, sometimes known as the chosen people, reminds me of the Jewish comic who quipped, "Why don't you choose someone else?" But this is our fate, our destiny, and as the Jewish people in America and in Israel, we share one soul, which is complicated, because many American Jews do not approve of the government of Israel today, and certainly not the Jewish extremists in it. Yet those of us who would equate Israelis with the Israeli government don't understand Am Yisrael. The people of Israel, whom Israeli journalist Yossi Klein Halevi describes as having two opposing models of Israel. The first is an old Jewish story. We devour ourselves and then our enemies do the rest. And the second story is new. From the depths of our divisiveness, we reclaim the instincts of peoplehood. It was Am Yisrael who I was looking for, the people of Israel, when I arrived at Ben Gurion Airport on October 29th, 2023, and I went to an enormous Hamal in Tel Aviv. Now, Hamal stands for Cheder Milchama, literally a war room, but really an emergency situation room. As early as 7:30 on October 7th, Hamalim were organized to coordinate logistics and provide basic supplies to the displaced. And these first Hamalim were established by Israelis who had been protesting the judicial reform, and in organizing those rallies, they had established this vast network of people. So even before the government was up and running, the people of Israel had kicked into gear. And the top floor of the enormous Hamal I visited last October had an elaborate center filled with people from the high-tech sector, performing the grim duty of trying to locate the 600 who were still missing since October 7th. And they scrubbed what they called the dark net and open web to search for faces and put together fragments of sounds and pictures of that day to identify survivors and victims. And they used every means to determine the fate of the missing. I learned much later that they tracked new flight patterns of birds of prey to find some bodies of the victims. Noah Ephron, creator and host of the Promise podcast, said that idea, follow the birds, is maybe the saddest and most remarkable acts of creativity I have ever heard of. For me, there was something so heartbreakingly meaningful about the people of Israel putting everything they knew how to do into finding the missing. There were hundreds of Hamalim all over the country that distributed everything in those early days, from meals and clothing to diapers and dogs for emotional therapy. And the word Hamal shares a connection in Hebrew to the word for compassion, Hamla. And how appropriate. Each of these Hamalim expand the circumference of compassion, allowing for the soul of the people to reawaken to its destiny, to bring more compassion to this world, one Hamal at a time. In this difficult year, when our eyes are drawn most readily to the government and military Hamalim, I find faith in Am Yisrael through Hamalim they created in the wake of October 7th, that the people of Israel created in the wake of October 7th. Chen of Kibbutz Kfar Aza organized her own Hamal from a kitchen table in Portugal, where she had been vacationing on October 7th. Through WhatsApp and phone calls, she was able to understand the locations on the kibbutz of some of the Hamas terrorists and was able to direct some kibbutzniks to safety in her sister's home, where they were ultimately rescued late in the evening. Chen told a group of visiting Sholem congregants in May, referring to Israelis and Palestinians, "Both of us are here to stay. Both of us deserve a good, safe, and decent life." And Udi Cohen, director of Camp Ramah in Israel, began organizing his own Hamal on October 8th for Sayeret Sanchanim, the 35th Paratroopers Brigade, helping supply them with specialized gear so they could minimize civilian deaths when rooting out fighters in tunnels. Trained in trauma therapy, Udi gave thought to how he would help these soldiers once they returned, all while organizing special camping experiences for the children of Ofakim, an evacuated city in the south. And Nanette Taib, the Israeli singer who created Nanette Taib, the Israeli singer, she created a chamal for musicians who fled the south, leaving behind their instruments. And in the shell shock of those first days, when the collective sentiment of the country was Ein Milim, there are no words, she distributed hundreds of guitars and keyboards and mandolins and recorders. As the poet said, where words leave off, music begins. And that's why, as one people, we sing Achenu in times of trouble. Achenu, this prayer for our siblings, our family, has perpetually reminded Jews that we are connected by a thread of faith and destiny as one people. And through any trial together, we can get through it with our humanity and our strength intact. And so as our hearts turn toward the east, we deepen our connection with Achenu, our siblings, our family. We pray for all those who have been kidnapped to be reunited with their families speedily, please God, today. And our hearts are big enough to hold not only our Israeli family, but all who have been injured, all who have been displaced, all mourners, all those in harm's way in Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria. With big hearts that continue to beat strong, we connect with the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, a people with one soul, one fate, one destiny.
Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Hanetunim b'tzara ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם, ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה, ומשיבו לגאולה. השתיים